With the engine blown off, let's continue on by loosening up our two clamps. Now come along the side of your throttle body and we're going to disconnect the electrical wiring harness. There's a little push tab right where this is. Just go ahead and press that in and then remove the wiring from the throttle body. Inspect your wiring. If you see any funny colors, it's corrosion and it needs to be dealt with. This looks great, so I'll set it aside. Now let's move up the intake here to where this line connects into it. As you try to tug on this, you're going to notice that this red piece tries to come out. Go ahead and press that in. I'm just going to take a 14mm wrench. I'll slide it right over the hose and I'm going to press it up against that red piece right there. Now at this point, I can grab onto the hose and remove it. Inspect it, make sure it's not damaged in any way. Right underneath where that hose was, you're going to find a vacuum line that comes right along here. Let's carefully remove this. All right, I got that off of there. We'll set that aside, put it someplace where you can easily remember it. Okay, now let's follow it this way, and we're going to remove this harness as well. Go ahead and pinch on this little center tab, and then remove this. Take a peek. Looks great. There should also be a hold down right across here. You just want to go ahead and pop that off. Ours is already missing. Okay, so at this point we have everything disconnected. The next thing that we're going to do is start removing the intake from the engine. Something to pay attention to is right along here is where the ports are going to be that lead into the engine. So once we start loosening up all these bolts, we want to be especially sure that nothing falls in. Once all the fronts are out, let's continue on by removing the two in the back. With all the bolts out, now let's continue on by grabbing onto this. We're going to give it a little wiggle and draw it up and away from the engine. Just keep in mind, we don't want anything to fall into these holes along the front. We're going to separate this area right here. Whatever. Let's cover these ports. The next thing that we're going to want to do is, of course, expose our last coil, which is located under here. To do that, we'll go ahead and remove this cover. There's two bolts, one here, one there. With both the bolts loose, let's go ahead and remove our oil cap here. We'll set that aside for a second, and then we can remove the cap, being careful not to lose either of our bolts. Take that oil cap and go ahead and put it right back on there. Let's go ahead and cover this area over here. And we're also going to cover the timing belt area. Now with all the intake ports coming across the front and of course the side over here covered, we also went ahead and covered up the timing belt area. The reason for that is because now we need to blow off the top of the engine. If you look along the top here, there's a lot of debris and we want to make sure none of it falls into the spark plug ports. At this point, we're clear to start removing our ignition coils. The process for one will be the same for all of them. I'm going to do this one right here because it's easiest for us to see. Let's go ahead and carefully grab onto this tab. I'm going to try to squeeze it. If for some reason it doesn't want to release, just use a pocket screwdriver or a thin screwdriver, and we're going to come right underneath this ear, gently lift it up. We don't want to break this, and then we'll slide this off. Inspect it, of course. Set it aside. Next, remove the mounting bolt that holds it to the valve cover. Grab onto that ignition coil, give it a little wiggle to break it free, and remove it from the engine. There it is, friends. Taking a look at the original ignition coil, of course you want to make sure you compare it to the brand new one. Essentially make sure that the connection point is the same, the mounting point is the same, and everything else looks perfect. At this point, we're ready for our install. Take a peek down here. You want to make sure that you have a little bit of grease along there. That's the area that the spark plug's going to go. If you don't have grease on there, it might go on there, but it's going to be real hard to get it off in the future. Slide this right down and onto the spark plug. Press it down, put in your mounting bolt. Once it's snug, let's go ahead and torque it to 10 Newton meters, which basically equates to 89 inch-pounds. Connect in the wiring harness, listen for a click. Give it a little tug. The process will be the same for the rest of the coils. Once you have all of them done, just go ahead and take the wiring and make sure it's sitting properly. Let's get this out of the way. Remove your oil cap again. Reinstall this. Goes underneath here. Start in both of your bolts before you snug either of them up. oil cap. The next thing you want to think about is your intake gaskets. Typically you want to go ahead and replace these. If for some reason you're not replacing them, at least carefully remove them from the area. And then you're going to want to inspect them. Give them the stretch test. Make sure when you stretch them you don't see any cracks, and of course make sure that they're nice and pliable. If they're stiff or firm and they definitely don't want to squish, you need to go ahead and replace them. After you test them out, just go ahead and clean everything down. Make sure you clean down the plastic area here. Now let's go ahead and get this right out of the way. Make sure there's no dirt coming across here and remove this as well. Next, we're going to go ahead and clean up this area along here. To do that, of course, you want to make sure that nothing falls inside these ports. That's what we keep talking about. So I'm just going to go ahead and take a rag, and I'm going to carefully put it inside here. When I do this, I want to make sure that there's plenty sticking up so I can go ahead and remove it. You definitely don't need to shove it down and in. After that, take a nice flat blade razor blade, and we're just going to go ahead and give this a nice scrape. And when I scrape, I'm trying to scrape away from the inside of the hole. Let's carefully install this. Just going to slide it right down. Come right over here. We'll slide this onto the box. Let's start in all of our bolts. Now we're going to snug these up, and when we do this, we're going to start from the center and work our way out. Torque all these bolts to 10 Newton meters. Listen for a click, give it a tug. Let's grab that lower hose. You want to try to make sure that it's pressed all the way up against the manifold itself. Connect this in, press it in as far as it can go. Reconnect in your throttle body. Listen for our click, give it a tug. Double check to make sure that your hose is sitting properly, and then of course tighten up both of your clamps. Okay friends, that job's done. What's left to do now? Hop in the car, start it up. Make sure you don't have a running condition. If it feels like the engine's shaking around, you probably have a misfire. If that's the case, just double check your work. You might have left something loose.